Pacific Drive. Prepare your vehicle, drive into the wilderness. Prepare your vehicle, drive into the wilderness. Prepare your vehicle, drive into the wilderness. Is this driving themed survival looter craft as beautiful as a Sunday summer sunset drive, or should the game be crushed to nothing in a car crusher at the nearest scrapyard? Stick around if you're interested in finding out if this game is worth your time and money. My name's Dav and welcome to D&D Gaming. Joining me in playing and reviewing this game as always is my brother Dale. So Dale, what's your first thoughts on Pacific Drive?
Well, this was completely new to me and I hadn't heard of the game until Dav mentioned that it might be a good one to review, and so apart from watching the brief launch trailer, I was going into this one fresh. As it's a new game that's only just released, this also means there are limited other reviews and news on it so far, so I could go into it with no preconceptions.
Yeah, for me, I only came across it a few weeks ago. I hadn't heard of it before then, and it was on PC Gamer's up and coming games list for 2024. It looked quite interesting, and I could see just from the trailers that it was right on my street. On the graphics settings side of things, I was glad to see a really decent range of graphics to tweak and adjust under the quality settings header. Most have the option of low, medium, high and ultra for things such as textures, foliage, view distance and shadows, the latter of which there are various shadow settings. A great range of graphic settings to get you a smooth running game.
Yeah, there is a solid range of options available and certainly enough to play about with and adjust to your liking. No complaints here from me, and there is a FOV slider for both the player and car view, and if you've watched some of our previous reviews you know how important a FOV slider is to me. I adjusted this after a while, as I usually do when this option is available, and settled on 95 as I generally prefer the view slightly zoomed out rather than too narrow a field of view.
So in terms of graphics and graphics performance, as for the graphics, our PC specs are up on screen as usual. The game ran nicely on my PC on the ultra settings. I didn't notice any graphical issues at all. As for the graphics themselves, they're slightly cartoony, but I think it kind of works for this game. The lighting is really nice, and driving around at night with your headlights on has a real horror filmish kind of feel to it. And the wilderness environment has a misty, smog-like appearance, and this contrasted against the neon-like lights on the car dashboard really adds to the atmosphere. I'm really impressed with the way the developers clearly focused on creating an atmospheric wilderness driving feeling, and it's really immersive and works so well in this.
Mine also defaulted to the ultra settings for the majority of the options, and it ran well without really any adjustment. At times it would drop to around 30 FPS or less, usually during large explosions or something similar on the screen, but I won't mark it down at all for this, as I can just drop the settings a little for better FPS if I want, and my CPU is really dated now so struggles a little at times. I thought it was well optimised though, and so no major concerns from me. The graphics themselves mostly look good, although I would say a little whiffy around the edges at times, such as when you drive off into the wilderness. The texture details seem to be a fair bit lower on some objects. It generally looked good though, and the car interior and garage look great, which is most important as you spend a lot of time with these in front of you. So in terms of player controls, these are mostly as you'd expect for the driving and first person aspects, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary for me on the default bindings. The early game introduction also acts as a tutorial, and so takes you through the basics of car handling and then the on-foot controls. There are full key rebindings available, which is good for those who prefer to use anything other than WASD. I did notice early on that I initially had some trouble getting out of the car, however stupid that sounds, as there are many options on many objects to either press or hold the key to interact with it. I think I missed the on-screen pop-up for exiting the vehicle to just use E, and so I was fumbling about holding E and nothing was happening, so I couldn't get out of the car. This was probably just a bit of stupidity on my part and nothing else caught me out, so no major concerns from me.
So I found the controls are pretty extensive. After all, this is a driving survival craft combination, so there's a lot to get your head around. Scratching the surface, default starting car controls are WASD to control the car's direction, accelerate and brake, C button to toggle the windscreen wipers, Z button to toggle the headlights, E button to get in and out of the car. As Dale's pointed out, sometimes you have to hold the E button down or just press it for different functions. As you get further into the game, more car functions and items such as the handbrake can be added, and the toggle button for this can be bound to a key of your choice. When on foot, the default controls are WASD to walk around, shift to sprint, space bar to jump, C button to crouch, and F button to kick, amongst others. The mouse is also used to look around and throw items. When fixing or modifying your car, controls include the E button to interact with the part of the car, R to remove the car part, C to scan the part for information, and left mouse button to fit a car part, amongst many others. There are so many combinations for various interactions using the same buttons, it can get a bit confusing at times, to be honest, as it takes a while to get used to, as Dale pointed out earlier. You can rebind your keys in the controls menu, and there is controller support. So in terms of game modes, there's only one main story mode. The year is 1988, and you, simply known as the driver, awake at the wheel of a car in a place called the Olympic Peninsula. 51 years before, in 1947, the area became the staging ground for testing of a new technology. Rumours spread of unnatural encounters, disappearances and evacuations. This led to the government walling off a section of the peninsula in 1955, creating the Olympic Exclusion Zone. For 30 years, the zone's borders grew until the government withdrew and sealed every access point. What happened inside was never disclosed. So in terms of mechanics, starting just south of the barrier wall, you get driving from the offset in the game, getting used to the default car controls as you drive. We won't mention much more about the beginning, as this would be a bit too much of a spoiler, but once you are within the zone itself, the main thing you'll be doing is driving, of course. You find an abandoned garage which becomes your base. From here you fix, modify and prepare your car for missions into the exclusion zone. The car gets properly battered up, and a key element of the game is keeping an eye on the car's vitals, as it's your main protection from the elements and from what lurks within the exclusion zone. You craft parts for the car which you fit and then have to keep an eye on and maintain. Body panels take damage, headlights blow out, tyres get punctures, the engine overheats, fuel level gets low, battery level gets low, and so on. Once your car is prepped, you can use the route map in your garage to plan a route and drive out into the various areas of the exclusion zone. Once in the area of an exclusion zone, you are free to explore using a combination of driving your car and on foot. There are abandoned buildings, petrol stations and infrastructure to look around. You loot the areas collecting items you can craft with, such as metal, plastic, glass, electronics and fabrics. You can store these in your backpack or in the storage trunk of your car. As you drive, you come across strange anomalies, including mini electrical storms, floating rocks and areas of extreme radiation. There are also enemies such as these flying scrap metal looking things which have a magnet that attach to your car and fling you around. Some saw blade looking enemies that go back and forth. And some stone looking statue figures that appear randomly and blow up if you hit them. Also, random odd things go on with the car sometimes, such as the bonnet flipping up while you're driving, the car headlights turning off, windscreen wipers going on and off, and stalling of the car. You are guided on the missions over radio communications by the garage owner, Oppie, and also two others, Toby and Francis, who become aware of your presence in the zone from the beginning.
Car's still not close enough to Cappy.
What now?
How about, launching the car into Cappy's core?
I'm sorry. What?
Once your mission objectives are complete in the area, you have to find one of the glowing orbs called stable anchors that are indicated on your car's route map. They charge your car's ability to access the link gateways also included on the route map. The anchors are typically surrounded by enemies, and all you can really do is try to avoid the enemies as you try and collect the anchors. Once collected, you put the anchor into the arc device in the passenger seat of your car, which charges the device. Sometimes you need multiple anchor devices to meet the minimum charge required for the arc device to work. Once enough anchors are collected, the arc device will be primed. Now you have to locate a link gateway on the map, and once a link gateway has been initiated with the arc device, it's a race against time to get to the gateway as the anomaly is closing around you. The more it closes in, the stranger things happen. For example, I was trying to get to a gateway, and as the anomalies closed in, the car started playing up, steering on its own and stalling. Make sure you don't initiate a link gateway that is too far from where you are, or you may not make it there. Once at the gateway, you drive into the orange glowing light column, and this transports you out of the zone and back to your garage. You can then drive in and begin prepping your car for the next excursion out into the exclusion zone.
I owe you an apology.
So in terms of UI, the UI in the car is quite extensive and so it takes a little getting used to. It was mostly intuitive though, and the menu does provide more info on most things, such as if you're not sure what some of the symbols on the dashboard mean. The UI for the player I thought was nicely done as well, with clean symbols and fonts and nothing too intrusive or taking up too much screen space. I like the fact that the mini-map is essentially built into the car as an extra screen, and so you can refer to this when needed, rather than having a separate mini-map on the screen to clutter things up. The menu UI is also nicely done and has a kind of retro feel to it, as if on an old computer, which fits with the theme of the game nicely. It will likely take you some time to get used to what's what, as being a survival game as well. This means there are a lot of sub-menus and then even more stuff in the garage with the workshop and upgrade stations and more. There is a lot of focus on resource management and inventory management. I do like that in this sort of game, and thought that the inventory screen was very nicely done, with the usual shortcuts to transfer items in bulk or individually as required.
So digging a bit deeper into the different UI, starting with the driving UI, the dashboard of the car gives you all the information you need for driving, such as speed, fuel, and battery gauges, shield protection level, icons for headlights and wiper toggle, car doors open icon, and the main one, your car damage and danger indicator. There's also a route map on the screen, as Dale's pointed out, in the passenger seat, a compass icon on the dashboard, and a car abilities panel to the left of the dash. Your current mission info is on the top right, dialogue comes up in the top of the screen, and your player vitals of health and radiation levels are top left. When on foot, you have the same current mission info dialog box and personal vitals on screen as the driving view. Other icons appear at the bottom of the screen that include number button shortcuts for inventory items, and an icon bottom left indicates if you have an item in your hand. Icons for interacting with items appear more centrally to the screen when applicable. The menu UI is set out really well and accessed using the tab key. The menu includes tabs for inventory items covering your pack, hands, and car trunk or applicable storage unit, blueprints for crafting items, missions, route map, and logbook. The logbook gives you information on each item in the game. It's extensive as it has to cover a lot of information, but it's well laid out and straightforward to navigate. All in all, I found the UI was really well laid out, especially for the sheer level of information it has to cover, with an in-depth crafting, fixing, survival mechanics incorporated well into an extensive range of icons and buttons.
So in terms of sound and music, the game has solid voice acting and everyone sounded convincing, with nothing standing out in a bad way.
I'm sorry, what?
There aren't a huge amount of characters voiced, but as they're all at a distance and communicating by radio, it's important that they chose some good voice actors.
Holy moly, you kidding me right now? Uppy, you saw it too, didn't you? Tell me you saw it too.
Saw what?
The player is not voiced, and this is fine by me, as I usually prefer games where the player is silent and not voiced, and so it worked to my preference here. There's a nice soundtrack which starts from the outset, and you can tell there's a big focus on the music, as you're both a radio player in the car and also one in the garage. This was a good call by the devs, as the music helps when carrying out more menial tasks such as repairs around the garage and also on the longer drives. If the soundtrack wasn't up to scratch, then this could be a real issue. Most of the songs sound quite indie, and there's some nice catchy tunes in there as well. I found some did get a little repetitive, especially in the garage, but if this is an issue, you can just run over to the radio and switch songs. The general sounds and atmosphere were good when out driving, and many times I just turned the in-car radio off for a more eerie feel, and this worked well with the dark and often silent country roads. Once you get near an anomaly, the majority of these make some sort of noise, and again all sounded good and really put you on edge at times. Very atmospheric game for sure.
Yeah, so I found in terms of sound and music, I'm going to start by saying we won't play any samples of the music here as we don't want any copyright issues, but I can say you won't be disappointed. The music is some of the best I've heard in any game. It's varied, but all different styles of songs that really work well with the game. All of them have a driving feel to the song, and the developers have clearly chosen very carefully. The music really helps immerse you in the game, and I really couldn't fault it. As Dale's pointed out, you can switch it on and off and up and down in volume, along with the different radio stations from the music player in the garage and from your car. The game sounds are absolutely superb. The wind, rain, storms batter the car when you're out and about. And even when you're in the buildings in the zone or back at your garage, you hear the rain bouncing off the metal sheeting panels of the building. There's lots of sounds when you're in the zone, like birds such as crows squawking, old damaged buildings creaking, and noises from strange entities that inhabit the area. Car fixing, modifying and breaking down of parts all sound really good too. The sound has clearly been well thought through by the developer, and it really helps immerse you in the world. I really couldn't fault it. I agree with Dale on the NPC's voice acting. I thought it was really good over the radio. It's really authentic sounding and certainly no complaints here.
I owe you an apology.
So in terms of bugs and glitches, apart from a few FPS drops here and there, which is most likely my CPU to be fair, I certainly didn't notice anything out of the ordinary and no bugs that I noticed.
Yeah, I didn't come across any bugs on my playthrough. So to sum up, things I liked about the game. Pacific Drive is really unique. I don't think I've played anything else like it. I think the developers really thought outside the box. This could have easily gone wrong in doing this, but in this case they really got it right. The game just oozes atmosphere. The graphics and lighting, game environment, sound effects and music all play a huge part in making any game atmospheric. Here they've got it bang on with all those things. The depth of the crafting and fixing mechanic is just right. Not too lacking, but also not too deep, especially the way you have to keep on top of the car's vitals, as you would a player in any survival game, but here it's focused on the car. The attention to detail in the game is really good. I was driving in a storm and heading straight towards the wind. The front of the car started lurching around and wouldn't go in a straight line. I then went to turn around and going side on into the wind, the car nearly flipped over. This is just one example where they've paid particular attention to making the game really engaging. The game has a real intensity to it. It's certainly not a relaxing driving game. You could be driving along quite fine and then the car starts playing up and all hell breaks loose. It's also really intense when trying to get back to the gateway links. I found myself fumbling around trying to close doors, put the car back in drive and get going before the enemies or environment anomalies get you. It's full on at times, jumpy and scary, but great fun.
Yeah, in terms of things I liked about it, it was just a great original concept for a game that blended the best parts of several games that I highly rate, such as In Sound Mind, one which we previously reviewed, but also this has a unique take on the driving and survival mechanics. I really like that it's based around the car, which almost has a life of its own at times. The cool gadgets and look of the car made me feel like a Ghostbuster at times. It has a great atmosphere which can be kind of creepy at times, such as when the mannequins, or tourists as they're called in the game, start moving when you look away. The music adds a lot to the feel of the game, and I found myself becoming very immersed in it at times. I love games set in the Pacific Northwest, and so this ticked that box for me as well. Considering this is the first game from this dev team, I'm really looking forward to seeing what else they do going forward. It's also a very deep game with a huge amount of crafting, upgrading, and a large skill tree to unlock. It's definitely a game that I will continue to play, and I feel like I've still got a lot to see in it. The replayability feels high due to the varying nature of the levels and the deep upgrades and skill tree.
So in terms of things I didn't like about the game, I've desperately tried to fault this game and really struggled to. I can only really nitpick at a few things, and these are very far from game breaking. I found it quite difficult to begin with when starting out with the tools for fixing the car up. There didn't seem to be much on-screen guidance in the mission text, and I had to dig through the logbook with quite a bit of trial and error to get used to it. A bit more guidance at the beginning would have been helpful, with maybe a few more tips or something up on screen. After a number of missions into the zone, it did start to get a bit repetitive too. I think it was missing the option to close the garage door down when you're fixing your car. This would have helped with the immersion, hearing the rain and the wind battering the building while you fix up your car, listening to the music on the radio. Instead, it's just open, letting all the wind and rain in.
I also don't have a huge amount of negatives, but I do agree that there could be a little better explanation at times. For example, being in the garage for the first time, there was a little bit too much going on to process, with all the crafting and UI to get used to. They still did a good enough job on this though, and it's also something that could certainly be improved by patching later on, as this is still a newly released game after all. Although I haven't found this to be an issue personally, I noticed a significant amount of the negative Steam reviews mention the fact that you're unable to save the game during a run, and if you quit mid-run, then you lose that progress. That doesn't sound great at all, and I'm not a fan of games where you can't save basically when you want to. But then again, this didn't really affect me, as I had made sure that I'd set the time aside for a good couple of hours every time I sat down, and so saving when back at the garage worked fine for me. Also, to be fair, most runs take far less than this sort of time, and more like 30 minutes between saves. There are slightly clunky controls at times, which I mentioned earlier in the review, and so I feel there could be a little improvement here.
So what do you think in terms of scores on this one, Dale?
Pacific Drive exceeded my expectations, with its unique style combining high-stakes survival with the touch of the supernatural and the best mechanics of several genres. The tense atmosphere and intriguing story will be sure to keep you hooked. If you're looking for a relaxing, casual game, however, you may want to look elsewhere, and if you don't have the time to deal with the lack of manual saves, then this might frustrate you. But if you're looking for an adrenaline-pumping driving adventure with a distinct feel, then Pacific Drive might just become your new favourite game. This is actually quite hard to score, because it feels like it could be close to a 9 out of 10 for me, but just not quite there. I compared my feeling of the game earlier to In Sound Mind, and so I think it's fair to give it the same rating as that, and so it's an 8.5 out of 10 from me, which is still definitely high praise indeed.
For me, Pacific Drive is an awesome game and one I will definitely continue playing. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to fully complete the game before getting this review out, but I've certainly played more than enough to review the game and will be continuing to play. Every element in this game gels together so well to create a unique, atmospheric, immersive and intense survival game that challenges you and keeps you on your toes. It will make you jump, panic you and relieve you in equal measure, making a fun and engaging game that is incredibly hard to fool. So my nitpicking and my dislike of a slightly repetitive gameplay loop is barely justifiable to bring the score down from the great things that make this game so enjoyable to play. As subscribers of this channel know, we don't give 10 out of 10 as a score for any game, as in our opinion no game is ever perfect. However, Pacific Drive is certainly up there with the best of them that scratch at that perfection. Therefore, I'm giving Pacific Drive a top-notch 9 out of 10. Well guys, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment. Hit that bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, and we'll see you in the next one.